Hello people, this is Sonali, the Melodramatic Bookworm. If you've been here before, welcome back, and if you're new to my channel, welcome to the Melodramatic Bookworm family. I'm here today to talk to you about my favorite books of 2021. There are more than 21 books in here, but since a couple of them are series, I've clubbed them together and I will be talking about them as a whole. But I had a lot of fun putting this list together. To be really honest, it wasn't that difficult because I have a separate tab in my book list Excel workbook in which I note down the books that I really love throughout the year. So it was just a matter of sifting and filtering through it. But these are books that I really loved and enjoyed, and some of them I thought I found really informative as well as helpful. Yeah, without any further ado, let's dive right into this video and let me share with you my favorite books of 2021. Kicking off this list is a series that you won't be surprised to see me talk about because you've seen me lose my mind over this series over the past year. The series I'm talking about is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabat Tahir. This is a fantasy series in which Laya is an orphan who is living with her grandparents and her brother. But one day the military storms in and kills her grandparents and arrests her brother. Now she wants to free her brother, but now she comes into contact with the resistance, and for them she agrees, in exchange for her brother's release, she agrees to spy on the commandant at the Blackcliff Academy, which is like huge. And this commandant is the most purely evil of all women, and there at the Blackcliff Academy, at the mercy of the commandant, she goes through her work, but she also comes into contact with Elias Viturius, who is one of the most feared masks of military society. And how their paths cross, what they have to do in order to free the people that they love and to free themselves, and as they go about, how their relationship with each other changes, as well as the truths that they find out. Oh, there's so much going on in this series and so much shock factor as well. I've already spoken about this in a couple of vlogs, wrap-up videos, as well as in a dedicated video in which I spoke about what this series really means to me. So please go check those out. This is like one of my favorite series of all time. Yeah, this is one that I will definitely highly recommend to everyone. It's like amazing, it knocks it out of the park. Just simply brilliant writing by Sabat Tahir. Next up is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds and illustrated by Chris Priestley. Jason Reynolds is an amazing writer. I really enjoyed the novel in prose that he has brought in this book, in which he talks about William, whose brother Sean is shot dead, and now William finds a pistol or a revolver in his house and he sets out to take revenge. On his way down in the elevator, he is confronted with the ghosts of people that have been in his past and who make him understand why this whole long way down he has to re-evaluate, and why the journey that he is going on right now is not the best idea there is. And there's a lot of reflection, self-reflection, and understanding that passes through Will during this time, and it's such a gut-wrenching book. It's an easy read language-wise because it's like in this format. I don't know if you can see it. It's in this format. So you can get through this in about an hour or so, but the subject that it contains is so hard-hitting, and Jason Reynolds, his narration, I listened to the audiobook while I was reading this, and his narration is gold. It's amazing. It's just something else altogether. Next up, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. You didn't see that coming? This is a story of Hollywood icon Evelyn Hugo, who is now old and she wants to tell her story. And she chooses Monique Grant to take her interview and tell her story in the way that she's narrating. And we see the life of this Hollywood star going from the peak and all the shades that it changes, and what happens when you are a woman in Hollywood, and how it has such rigid standards especially for women, and how Evelyn Hugo navigates it all, and how she gives out lessons one after the other about strength, about power, about doing what it takes in order to find that success and in order to find that happiness for herself. It's simply one of the most iconic characters I've ever read, Evelyn Hugo, and I found myself waiting for her appearance. And when she did come in front of me, I was like in awe. I had goosebumps crawling down my spine. It's just become one of my favorite books of all time, not just favorite book of 2021. It's great. Next up is Boys Will Be Boys by Clementine Ford. Clementine Ford is one of the most iconic feminist figures in the whole world right now. She does not mince words. She just says things as they are, and she is just done with patriarchy and misogynistic sexist pigs of men as a whole. And in Boys Will Be Boys, she talks about how, feminism and toxic masculinity, and how patriarchy has affected men as well, men and boys, and how it suppresses them, forces them to be in one particular way in order to be there in society, like in order to live in society. Although the perpetrators of patriarchy are men, and millennia of social conditioning has done this thing where we have set roles for men and women, which is a little sad. Clementine Ford, in this book, she gives examples of how men have gotten away with such things and how men have been conditioned to behave in one such way, and because of which a lot of other problems arise. And I love her writing. I love her books. This and Fight Like a Girl, which I read in 2020, were two books that have woken something in me. Next up is a series that edged An Ember in the Ashes out from first spot to second spot, and that duology is The Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. This is the story of 6 criminals or outcasts who end up going on this impossible seeming heist. I became so close with these characters. I love these characters so much. They are criminals, yes, but when you read their backstories and when you read about what they are doing and how this whole found family is progressing into the future, and what happens when things go impossibly wrong or things go impossibly right, either way, you know you can trust Casbreaker, but you can't trust which way things are going to go. So you have to be very careful with each page that you turn, because there are some shockers that are present in these two books. You just be careful when you read these. But Leigh Bardugo has outdone herself with this series. In these two books, I just find that wit, that humor, and how these characters deal with the things by being witty and having a banter with each other. And every single one of these characters has that weight to themselves that you just want to keep at it. Like, you want to keep reading more about them. You want to give them a big hug. Yes, I know, despite that. You ask me a recommendation especially for a fantasy series, this is what you got. Next up is Get a Life Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. Get a Life Chloe Brown is the story of Chloe Brown, who has chronic pain. Like, she has fibromyalgia and she is in constant pain and she's constantly tired. And you know what? I related to her on such a huge level. And when she's moved into a new apartment a while ago, and she comes into contact with the superintendent of the building, Redford Morgan, and how their relationship progresses forms this entire story. The whole story is so funny, so warm, so beautiful, so romantic and steamy as well, because Talia Hibbert's books are adult romances and they are steamy as hell, but every single one of them has this particular message that you need to be accepting of others' faults while helping them become better people, but you also need to extend that same kindness to yourself. And it felt like a bit of a personal attack, but I'm going to let it slide because I know that's important. Get a Life Chloe Brown is amazing. Like, of all the Talia Hibbert books that I've read so far, Get a Life Chloe Brown is one that is really close to my heart because of how much I relate to Chloe. Plus, I also now have a fictional crush on Redford Morgan. Next up is The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This is a story of Cora, who is a slave on a plantation in Georgia. But one day a fellow slave called Caesar approaches her and he tells her that there is a way out of all of this, and they manage to run away. And they catch the Underground Railroad and go to a different state which has abolished slavery or something. And their whole journey of being on the run and to finding a life for themselves and then running again, now that there's a slave catcher on their hot on their trail, and what this whole journey entails forms this entire story. There are so many similar stories that happened because slavery existed in the USA during those times, and white people thought they were entitled to do all of that just because this color of the skin was white. I don't know what this whole thing. Okay, I will explode. Who told them that whiteness meant superiority? And the way Colson Whitehead has written this story, it channels all of it. It channels the white people's complete a-holery, and it channels the black people's pain, the slaves' pain. And I just felt it wrench my heart. It just killed my heart a little, because even though it's in a distant past, we still know that some of the most racist people are still there even to this day, in present day. But hopefully there will come a time when this will just be memory and not something that happens to people on a daily basis. Even though we cannot say that same thing about present time, because a lot of black people still go through that. And I don't know where this whole review went, but this particular book is so gut-wrenching. Next up is an audiobook that I listened to earlier this year. I think it was in June, and I fell in love with the book. It is by one of my favorite authors of all time, and it's a non-fiction book. But I loved it so much that I went and got a paperback copy of it, and that book is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This is John Green talking about the Anthropocene, the current geologic age, and he talks about little things that he picks up from here and there of his own experience, of things he has seen on the news, on the media, on social media and everywhere, and he reviews them, and he makes such statements and such observations, minute observations, that you cannot help but listen to him in awe or read this book in awe. It's great. I really loved it, and the way he can go from something very trifling to something very important in the span of a second is simply mind-boggling. That is why I love John Green so much, because he brings out the complexity within the simplicity, and I feel like that is what makes him such an amazing author. Please do go ahead, read this or listen to this better, because John Green's narration makes it even better, and it gives it a sort of personal touch, because a lot of these are from his own personal experiences. So yeah, this is like, I was expecting to like this, but I didn't think that I would end up loving this book so much. Next up is a book by one of my favorite authors and poets of all time. This is one author and poet who I will defend to the end of time. Like, she is one of my top favorites alongside Matt Haig, and the person I'm talking about, the poet I'm talking about, is Nikita Gill, and the poetry collection that she came out with in 2021 was Where Hope Comes From. And during the time of this pandemic, when it all feels so bleak and hopeless, this was a collection of poetry that just tugged at my heart. And this is one thing that I will always say about Nikita Gill's work, because they resonate with me so much. They give me so much hope. They tell me how I can build that hope, and this does exactly that. Let me read to you a poem from her, from this collection. A poem that just lit up something within me, because what Nikita Gill does is that she reminds you that you are not insignificant. Yes, many people might say that we are in the grand scheme of things, in the bigger universe or something, we are nothing, we are just specks. Yes, it might be true, but you are not born without reason, is what Nikita Gill tells you, and I'll tell you what she says for that. A reminder from the stars. Constellations of stars exploded to bring you to life. The molecules in your left collarbone come from a different galaxy than your right, and by defiantly existing against all odds, you are honoring their sacrifice. How can you not love something like this? How can you not love something that's giving you so much hope, so much strength? It's reassuring you, and that's what it does. Next is a book that I did not think I would love this much because I read The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri earlier this year, just before this, and I was like, I liked it, but I did not like find it wow or anything. But when I read Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri, I fell in love with it. I felt seen. I felt like the main character in this, who is living alone in Italy, she is just me, because she loves her solitude. She loves to have a life of her own, but sometimes there are pockets of time where she just wants someone by her side. She reminisces the times that she has spent with other people. She reminisces about experiences, her interactions with other people and all of that. But the thing about this main character is that even though she has those pangs, she values her solitude way more than anything else. She is a kind of an introvert, and she values her alone time, and she values her own self. When I say that I want to go out alone on a trip, or I want to go out alone and spend time by myself, people are actually gobsmacked as to how I can do that. Don't you need people you need to talk to, you want to talk to? I'm like, I would prefer wallowing in my own doubts and mistakes and all, rather than subject someone else to it. I mean, that's a whole different other ball game altogether, but let's not go there. But this is a cracker of a book, such a great one. This has gotten a lot of mixed reviews, and I see why, but I also think that the very things that people did not like about it are some things that I absolutely treasure about this book. Next up is Quiet by Susan Cain. Susan Cain, in this book, she talks about how the power of introverts and what is dragging them back, as well as what could be the thing that pushes them forward. But she also talks about how the world needs to respect introverts, how it can use the introverts' powers, which there are a lot, to make one's work easier. And she talks a lot about this, and she also talks about how introverts and extroverts can work in tandem to make things better, to make work better, to make life easier. And I really love that about this book, that it doesn't put down this or that in order to make a point, but it also talks about the shortcomings as well as the advantages of being an introvert as well as that of an extrovert. I mean, yes, I still bristle at how unfair it is and how unfairly introverts are treated, that whenever we sit down in a corner and we don't want to socialize, people are like, anti-social. There's a difference. There's a difference between antisocial and asocial. Like, we just want quiet. To all the introverts out there, as well as for everybody else, look at some of the most successful business people in the world and then come back and talk to me. And also, while you're at it, please read this book. It's great, it's amazing, highly recommend. Next up is Loveless by Alice Oseman. Loveless is the story of Georgia, who has never been in love, who has never been kissed, who has never found someone who she could call a life partner. But when she goes to university, she is determined to find love. And now she goes on this whole experimentation process where she talks to, she tries to talk to different people, but she begins to understand facets of herself that she didn't understand before. And this is such a great angsty book, but great book about self-acceptance and learning about one's own sexuality and being comfortable with it. I cried when I read this book because it talks about the power of friendship, and to have depicted an asexual character such as Georgia and to talk about her experiences, it was simply something else to read. In quite a few ways, I must say that I found myself in this book. Although not asexual like Georgia, there are a lot of other points in this book where I found myself nodding and saying ki, yeah, that's just me. Next up is The Last Nomad by Shugri Said Sal. This is a memoir by Shugri Said Sal, and this talks about Shugri being the last nomad from Somalia, if I'm not mistaken, and her experiences as a nomad, as well as her experiences in a big city. And this is such a great, well-written memoir. I mean, we cannot tell people how to write their own memoirs, but the language used, the flow of this memoir about her experiences, about her relationship with the people around her, about how different societies look at women and men, and how her changing relationship with these different societies as she moves from place to place, it forms this whole book. I'm really glad that I got an e-arc of this book from NetGalley, and that I was able to read it. One of my favorite books of 2021. Of course, it's on this list, so it's one of my favorite books and one of my favorite memoirs of all time. I'm sure that I'm going to go back and read this book. I also listened to it as an audiobook, which is also amazing. It's great. Would recommend, highly recommend. Go read it. Next up is Manto, selected short stories by Sadat Hassan Manto and translated into English by Atish Tasir. This is a fantastic translation. Atish Tasir has done such a great job in bringing Manto stories to life in English. In this collection of short stories, Manto writes a lot about the cities that he's lived in, his relationship with those cities, as well as a few stories related to partition literature, which was the reason I picked this book up, because we did a partition lit collab earlier in 2021, in around August, around Independence Day, and we read a couple of books each, and this was one of mine, and I will link you to that video if you'd like to go check that out. But this is amazing. Manto's stories are empathetic. They look at things in a human being's lives that you would never think of. He could write a story about a wall and I would read it. And the thing about Manto's stories are that they do not just live in one lifetime. They were written earlier in the 20th century, but you can apply them to this day, and that is what I love most about it. It's easy to read these stories. You will get a lot of lessons, life lessons that you can apply to your own life as well. Some stories are just observations, there's nothing to take away from them, but some stories, there's a lot to understand, be it in metaphors or analogies. Manto is a genius, and I know that I'm going to go back and read more of his works. It's just amazing. Next up is The Stationery Shop of Tehran by Marjan Kamali. This was a Bookbound Club pick for the month of, I don't remember, September. I think it was August, September, and we loved it. We had a long discussion about it. If you'd like to go check that out, I'll leave the links for you. This is a story of Roya and Baman, who meet in a stationery shop in Tehran. They are teenagers and they meet in the stationery shop and they fall in love. But Baman has sort of political leanings, and things are going on with his family, and what happens when they do get engaged to each other, but then one day Baman just doesn't turn up, and years pass. Roya goes on to study in the United States of America. She settles down over there, but suddenly one day she is confronted with the opportunity to meet Baman, and now she wants to find out why did he leave her all those years ago, because she was heartbroken, she was torn. The great love of her life was Baman, and to read about what exactly happened, it was so gut-wrenching, because you know that sometimes you want people to make decisions for you, but then again, when it comes to the huger decisions, you understand that it's not up to others to make those decisions. Nobody can play the game of life that has been dealt to you, and to see everything that pans out, it was just heartbreaking in a lot of ways. Some of the characters I hated, some I absolutely loved. There is one particular character that still grinds my gears even after all these months. But The Stationery Shop, it's a very well written book, beautifully written. It encapsulates family life and friendships, and in the whole situation, in the whole political situation as a backdrop. It has done, Marjan Kamali has done a great job in bringing the story to life, and it also shows the parallels of how this external event, this huge external event in Tehran, this is set in 1953, so there's a lot of political turmoil going on over there, and how that's going on and how it reflects Roya and Baman's life. And if you can also go watch the video, our discussion video, after you read this book, you'll see that we have explored a lot of the elements of Roya and Baman's life. Next up is Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. This is one of my most the warmest books that I've read in 2021. This is a story of Wallace Price, who is a condescending a-hole. I mean, he thinks that he is the best at everything he does, and he has rigid standards, and he might be the best, but he does not tolerate even minute mistakes from the people around him, and he thinks that by doing that only will he, you know, get about the good of his own company or his own life. But he suddenly dies one day, and now he is being led away by his reaper, and he is brought to a peculiar little tea shop where Hugo, who will help him cross over, he allows him to stay as much as he likes. And now Wallace's thinking, the way Wallace is thinking, shifts throughout this whole experience, forms this entire story, and it's a typical TJ Klune. It's warm, it's funny, it's amazing. It'll give you like a different perspective on life and about how you need to see things, and how and what things actually make you a better person. And I loved this. I really enjoyed reading this book, although at some places I did feel that it was a little dragged, and that it was like a direct inspiration from The House in the Cerulean Sea. But then again, that is just TJ Klune. He writes what he knows best, and it is equally heartwarming and heart-wrenching and warm and fuzzy and lovely and everything else that you could probably expect, you could possibly expect from a book such as this. Talking about death and in the meantime giving you lessons on life, I don't think anybody else can do that as good as TJ Klune does. Next up is The Reading List by Sarah Nisha Adams. This is about the reading list, who different people find and who begin to connect over this. One is a teenager who's living in a house with a depressed mom and a brother who's trying to be there for everyone, and then there's an old man called Mukesh who is living in a house where his wife has died, and they are trying to find meaning to their lives, and they find this reading list everywhere, and they sort of start connecting, and a small sort of book club kind of grows, and how things change, how things evolve, and it just shows how reading can put you in touch with yourself as well as with others, and how it can change your life, how it can change the life of society and community as well. It is just so heartwarming. I mean, I just want to go into this book and give Mukesh a big hug, because there's a lot of places, a lot of instances in this book where you just want to protect him with everything you have. And this is a great book. We read this as part of the Drama Queen-a-thon, the book club that I host, and every one of us absolutely loved it, and it's great. I mean, I don't think I can say anything else. If that wasn't enough to convince you, let the books on the cover convince you, because there are some great books, be it The Kite Runner, To Kill a Mockingbird, I think there's Rebecca also somewhere. Let those convince you, because this is totally worth it. Next up is Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is nothing very groundbreaking. I know a lot of the things in here, but sometimes all you need, like I've mentioned before, sometimes all you need is someone to tell you that, hey, look, this is what you've got to do. You know this, but do it in this order and things will be fine. And this was that book for me. I really liked the way the author has cut down the steps and turned it into something that's very doable, and I really liked how simple this is, how easy this is. There's nothing very complex, like no fancy language, nothing very high flying. It's just simple language that will help you. and I have started implementing it little by little, and I wouldn't say that I am seeing changes right away, because sometimes that's not how it works. It's going to be a while before I can see changes, but I intend to completely apply whatever the author has said in here, and I'm going to reread it as well. So that's another thing. I will listen to this on audio this time, and I know that it's going to be really helpful for me. Look at the number of tabs also. Can you please? There's a lot. And I made notes also this time. Yeah, there's a lot in here. Next up is Remnants of a Separation by Aanchal Malhotra. I've done a whole vlog about this, so I won't talk much about it. If you'd like to go check that vlog out, link here as well as in the description box below. In this non-fiction book, Aanchal Malhotra talks about the partition, and she interviews some people and explores their memories through tangible elements that they brought here or took to the other side, to Pakistan. And it sheds so much light on the partition as a whole, and about how it affected people, and about how much some random arbitrary line that was drawn on a map impacted so many people, millions of people, caused so much bloodshed and violence. And this is such a gut-wrenching read, but it's also very important, because through these tangible memories you find out a lot about what had actually happened back then, and you inform yourself through that. And I feel like this is such required reading. Everybody must read it. It's an important book, and I cannot recommend this enough. I've been like on top of this ever since I finished reading it. It took me a while because the contents are so heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, but I finally did finish it, and I understand why this book is so well loved. And everybody, please go ahead, read this, buy this, read this, and you'll thank me later. And me personally, I will thank Jyotsna from Jyotsna's Bookscapades for making me read this book. It's amazing. Thank you, Jyotsna. Next up is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and translated into English by Jeffrey Trusselot. And this is the story of a cafe in which you can travel through time. But the rule is that you can travel through time only while sitting in one particular seat. And when you go back in time, you have to come back before the coffee gets cold. And this is such a great book. It starts off by being a little repetitive, but it ends on such a high note. It just blew my heart away, because it talks about acceptance and familial relationships, husband and wife, sisters, lovers, and there's so much more in here that I went and bought the second one, Tales from the Cafe, I think it's called. And the narrator Arina E has also done a wonderful job. I absolutely loved it. I gushed about this in a reading vlog. If you'd like to go check that out, I'll leave the links for you. And this is something that I would definitely highly recommend, and reading this kind of Japanese literature has been some sort of a different experience for me, and I really loved it. Last but not the least on this list is The Authenticity Project by Claire Pooley. This follows Julian Jessop, who is kind of tired of having to put up a front, but so what he does is he starts a journal called The Authenticity Project, and he writes down the truth of his life in there, and he leaves it in a cafe, and then someone else writes in that, and someone else reads it, and it just keeps going around. And how these people come into contact with each other, and how it changes their life, and how things around them change, and how they find meaning in their lives, forms this entire story. This is a very bad gist, but it's such a great book. There's so much meaning to every page turned, to every one of these characters. Yes, I did find that the book is a little draggy, but I think this is genuinely one of the most beautiful books that I've read in 2021, because it talks so much about being authentic to yourself, of being true to yourself, and not lying, and not reassuring yourself by doing something that will hurt you, or doing something that will hurt others. There's a lot more to authenticity than just telling the truth even if it hurts others, or just plain straight up lying. I really enjoyed this. I did a full review on Instagram on which the author also commented, and I was like So those were the books that I absolutely loved in 2021. Which of these have you read? Which ones do you want to read? Which ones would you recommend that I read off of my huge ass TBR in 2021? And which of these books are you going to add to your TBR? Which ones are you going to add to your wish list? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, please like it and share it to spread the word. And if you like my content and would like to see more from me, don't forget to hit subscribe and click on the bell icon beside the subscribe button to get notified as and when I post new videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and add melodrama to your life.